Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Israel is marking its 64th Independence Day, an opportunity for us to have a look at the stalled peace process and all that's going on that front. I'm joined today in order to do that by Einat Wilf, who is an MP, also a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee in the Israeli Knesset. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure.
Independence Day, the 64th. And yet, an awful lot of very important questions, Israel's borders, its relations with its neighbours, all sorts of things that are fairly fundamental to its existence and to its future have yet to be settled.
It's true, but sometimes we forget that when we look at the span of Jewish history, modern Israeli history is a blip. So for the Jewish people, moving from 2 millennia of non-sovereign existence to being a sovereign, independent people in their own state has been a massive historic transformation, in a way unparalleled and unprecedented. So like you just said, in many ways we're still negotiating many of the fundamentals of who we are, who we want to be, and that is very much still an ongoing process. Israel is still today, at the age of 64, a work in progress.
A work in progress that it is, of course, carrying on within itself, but having to seek answers with Palestinians. That process looked as though it might be kick-started again, seems to have stalled again, and that remaining sticking point remains the settlement activity that continues.
The issue is, I must say at this point, far broader. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict was always, in many ways, derivative of the greater Israeli-Arab conflict, and especially right now with the revolutions in the Arab world, with what is probably the biggest transformation in the entire Middle East since World War I. So a huge once-in-100 years change. This will probably transform everything we know about the Middle East, how it's structured, how it's put together. And the Israeli-Palestinian issue in many ways is probably likely to be derived, and the changes in it will be derived from everything that is ongoing in the region. And I think the sad truth is, and that is one of the very problematic issues still for Israel after 64 years, is that we are still not truly accepted, and I mean not to say embraced, but not even accepted here in the region as a legitimate state. There is no appreciation of the historical connection between the Jewish people and their historic land. And there's still a mistaken sense that somehow Zionism was a colonial movement that brought strangers here, rather than an understanding that, at least for the Jews, in their mind, they were coming home. So I think there's still, sadly, no acceptance, no true acceptance of Israel in the region. And much else is really just a derivative of that fundamental fact.
Despite that, Israel seems to be coming in for growing criticism, growing isolation within the international community. The Palestinian policy of going to the United Nations to raise awareness, really, of its cause, of its arguments, to draw attention to its difficulty to reach a point where both sides can sit down and talk, has been very effective politically. Is it not difficult for the government of Benjamin Netanyahu today to allow settlement activity to get in the way of a process that most of the world agrees is necessary?
I'm no supporter of the settlement project. My roots are in the Labour Party, even now in the Independence Party. I don't support the settlement project. I certainly believe that we should limit whatever settlements to those areas that have been agreed by now that they will be part of Israel in any future agreement. But I believe that if the world is truly concerned about keeping the two-state solution alive, then they should focus on all the aspects that prevent resolution. And the settlements is certainly one of them, but it is only one of them. Other things that should get the same kind of attention, international focus, and even condemnation are first and foremost Arab rejectionism, the continued refusal to accept Israel for what it is in the region. I would argue the perpetuation and inflation of the Palestinian refugee problem, whereby fourth, fifth generation Palestinians living in Jordan, living in Gaza, living in a Palestinian Authority under their own governance continue to be called refugees. This is a problem that should certainly be addressed. Incitement, anti-Semitism in the Arab world. There's a whole host of things that are stopping a two-state solution. Settlement is one of them. But I believe that if the international community is truly concerned about keeping the two-state solution alive, it should focus on all of these issues equally.
Mahmoud Abbas has sent a letter to Benjamin Netanyahu, to which we have yet to see a reply. He calls once again on the Israeli government to cease its settlement activity. In the last few days, Benjamin Netanyahu's government has approved the existence of illegal settlements, legitimized the three settlements that had been illegally built. The Palestinians take this as a reply to their letter. Are they right to do so?
I don't think so. I don't think it would be proper to look at it as a reply to their letter. But at the end of the day, this is not a productive process one way or the other. The Palestinian focus on the settlement freeze, the reason that for a 10 months settlement freeze that the Netanyahu government agreed to, an unprecedented act by any government, was entirely wasted by the Palestinians refusing to negotiate. So keeping the focus on the settlements, I mean, it's a great PR tactic, but if they actually want a state, there's no alternative to just sitting down, negotiating, no preconditions. We all know by now what an agreement would look like. We have been sitting for 20 years now. We have all the details. What needs to be taken are the key decisions. Both sides have to make very difficult decisions to part with some big dreams, some big hopes. The Palestinians will have to accept that the Jewish people, like them, have a legitimate claim on this land, have a legitimate right to be here, at least on part of the land. They will have to accept the idea that Palestine is the homeland of all the Palestinians. These are the kinds of things that will have to be accepted. We in Israel will have to part with any notion that the West Bank or a big part of it will be part in Israel. I think most Israelis have already parted with that notion. We have come to terms with the idea of another Palestinian state. So what we're saying ultimately is a look at details and various tactics to avoid negotiations. This is not productive. If the Palestinians want a state, they can have it tomorrow.
Do you think that a two-state solution, given all of that, given everything you outlined, all these enormous issues that need to be addressed and understood and accepted by both sides, do you think that a two-state solution today is still a viable possibility, particularly given that within Israeli politics, the Israeli discourse itself, there are those both on the very left and both on the very right who are saying that actually a one-state solution is what should be sort of two very different Israels in mind. But nonetheless, there are perhaps those who are increasingly thinking that a two-state solution is not necessarily the answer.
Let me put it this way. The notion that there is a one-state solution, there is only one thing. It's called a one-state non-solution. There's no such thing as a one-state solution. The only way for us to live side by side is each in our own national state. This has been the governing idea. The focus should be on keeping this possibility alive until the moment that comes that the decision by both sides is made. I think we need to address, as countries and as the international community, all the factors that are preventing this solution from coming into being. And as I said, the settlement is only part of them. The inflation, perpetuation of the Arab refugee problem, the Arab rejectionism, incitement, these things have to be treated with the same focus and intensity that the international community reserves for the settlement issue. And at one moment, it will happen. We just have to make sure that we create the conditions for that to happen at the right moment.
I'd like also to ask you about Iran, another of the preoccupations of Benjamin Netanyahu. We heard him express himself on the occasion of Holocaust Day last week, saying that there is time for these sanctions to work, but that perhaps time is running out. Equally, there are Russian initiatives in particular afoot, the idea being that Iran may in fact be willing to stop the advancement of its nuclear program to avoid further sanctions. So it seems that some window of opportunity for negotiation is open there. Do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu is willing to wait?
Benjamin Netanyahu has said again and again that his preferred option is for diplomacy to work. This is the preferred option of everyone. But in order for diplomacy to work, we must not be gullible negotiators. The Iranians are deeply concerned about the entry into effect in a few weeks of the oil purchasing embargo. This is not only an issue of the economy, because it sends a very important message from the West that they're serious about stopping the nuclear program. The Iranians are very eager to stop those sanctions from coming into effect. But by saying that they will stop where they are now, that is not sufficient. They actually have to go back. They are very clever, very wise negotiators. So every time they move 2 steps forward, and then they say, we'll stop now. And then they continue to move again and say, we'll stop now. So what has to be clear is that to avoid further sanctions, they actually have to roll back the program. They have to stop enrichment, they have to roll back their enrichment program, they have to open themselves up for serious inspections, they have to dismantle the Fordow site, which is inside a mountain. So they are very wise negotiators, and we need not to fall into that trap.
Einat Wilf, thank you very much indeed for having been our guest on today's interview. That brings us to the end of France 24's interview for today. We'll be back though tomorrow for another. I do hope you'll join us then. Goodbye.